Hi, Elke. This is your Monday lesson, and this is going to be more of a art history lesson because the reason being that I do art history lessons when you don't do the previous assignment, which was this one, and you said that you weren't going to do it. No, you didn't say you weren't going to do it. You said you hadn't done it because it wasn't your aesthetic sense, and so you didn't want to do it. That didn't mean you weren't going to do it. However, I'm not always positive when you give me answers like that. If you are just putting me on and saying something to provoke a discussion, or whether it's not your aesthetic sense. But usually, as a rule, I do not ask you to copy my artwork and to make a copy of what I've done. And you seem to have gotten the impression that what I wanted you to do is make this exact same thing with red thread and the rope and white paint with black patterns, and I even discussed the type of patterns. And so you got the impression that I wanted you to copy something that I had made. And in getting that impression, you are correct, because I was shown how to do this when I was, well, really 10 years old, to make a thing of this sort. In other words, to make a magic stick. And somehow or other I got the notion that I really wanted you to make the same thing. Now, to be fair, I don't usually ask you to duplicate the artwork that I do. And I'll give you an example. If you remember this assignment, now it just so happens that often when I give you an assignment, I happen to like the thing that I make and I keep it. And this is one, it's a purple, do purple tones as an abstract painting and include geometrics. And that's what, this was this example that I made, but you didn't go and take your paint and two reddish purple in the corner and 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 circles, circles of purple and 2 arcs. You did this painting. Now, this painting has shades of purple, it has part of a triangle, part of a square. So you did the assignment, but it doesn't look like mine. So, in general, I don't ask you to copy the things that I do. But I have to interrupt that, the introduction, to talk about this. Now, where did this come from? A bunch of pillars. It's from this. When you were doing Reeboks, my studio, when I couldn't see it, because I hadn't figured out how to get into that room yet, which you showed me later. When I finally got into the studio that you made for me, the doorway had pillars, and I remarked about it, and I said that, I don't remember my words, but I said something to you about, like you said about this. You said, it's not my aesthetic sense. What I said were square pillars, and I said, it's not my aesthetic sense, I want round pillars. And you said, well, there's Tuscan pillars. I said, okay, I'll take Tuscan, but I never heard of Tuscan pillars. And I don't know if there's such a thing as Tuscan pillars. So you put up the Tuscan pillars, and this is a pillar, and this is the capital. The capital, the Tuscan pillar, kind of looked like that. And I said, oh, that's not a Tuscan pillar, that's a Doric pillar, because that's a shape that is called Doric. Now later, I decided, or I often do, if I say something like, there's no Tuscan pillar, I think to myself, maybe I'm wrong about that. Well, there is a Tuscan pillar, and it's this, except it's simpler. So the Doric, simpler pillar is called a Tuscan pillar. Now, we could talk at length about the meaning of pillars, and it's a complicated subject, and it would make too long a lesson. But I want to talk about the 3 types of columns that the Greeks used. The subject goes on into the Romans, and then into the Greek revival, and these column types have been used ever since the beginning of the Greek architecture. And so the subject is infinite, but the kernel of it, or the start of it, is with this one, the Doric. Now, what does the encyclopedia say about the Doric? The Doric order was one of 3 orders of ancient Greek and later Roman architecture. The other 2 canonical, in other words, like out of the Bible, orders were the Ionic, that's the Ionic, and the Corinthian, that's the Corinthian, which we'll move over here later. Originating in Western Doric region of Greece, that basically means Athens, is the earliest, and it's in essence the simplest of the orders, though still with complex details. The Greek Doric was fluted, These are the flutes. The Greek Doric, this was fluted. And had no base. In other words, at the bottom there was no base. It just went right down to the floor and stopped. And there wasn't a rectangle or donut shape at the bottom. So that's the Doric. And this is a pillar in my hallway that I use for coat rack. And I mentioned to you that I had a Doric pillar, and it's my favorite pillar, in my hallway. It's off of a porch. And the porch was being torn down, and there were 6 of them, and I bought all 6 of them. I kept one of them, and I put these hangers on it to make it. But look how, after more than 2,000 years, look how many similarities there are between this and this. There's the box at the top, although mine doesn't have this lid. Then there's a donut shape. Under the donut shape, there's a little ring, and I have that little ring. Mine added a belt, which this does not have. And then there's a two-level belt around here. So this is almost exactly a Doric column. Now we come to Ionic. This is Ionic. Now, I always thought that the Ionic represented a scroll, in which if you unrolled a scroll, you would have a circle at each end combined by a band. And many of these Ionic columns have a shape like this. In other words, instead of straight across, it goes like this. And even with lines in it like that. Even more so making it like a scroll. But they don't mention, in description of this, they don't mention a scroll. They talk about the clover in the middle. There's a little clover shape like this. Right there with a circle in it. And you see that it's connected to a spiral. And so what they're saying is the origin of this shape is a plant, like a clover. And this is the stem, and that's the leaf. And that's what, and here's what they say. The major features of the Ionic order are the volutes. This is called a volute, which have been subject of much theoretical and practical discourse based on a brief and obscure passage in Vitruvius. This gets very complicated, but we don't need to know it all. The Greek Corinthian. This is the Corinthian, which I'm going to put like that. That's the Corinthian, and it says, the Corinthian order is named for the Greek city of Corinth, and it was to which it was connected in the period. However, according to historian Vitruvius, the column was created by a sculptor named Callimachus, probably an Athenian. He drew an acanthus leaves. These are acanthus, a plant leaves. Now, they don't mention in here what I read as the origin of this, and that was kind of mythological, and that they said that a woman went into the woods and was reading a book under a tree. And there was an acanthus plant nearby, and she placed her book on top of the plant, and the plant grew around it, and that's the origin of this pillar. Well, all we need to know about it is this is the simplest, this is more complicated, and it has volutes. The volutes, these are volutes, and they were incorporated from the Ionic into the Corinthian. Later on, in Roman times, all these elements were combined in all various ways. Now, that came up because of Reeboks and because of columns. But now I want to talk about the origin of this assignment, because to me it's very important. The origin of this assignment is this. It's a photograph of your axe, which I referred to as a hatchet, and you corrected me. You said, no, it's not a hatchet, it's an axe. You made this axe. Now, I did not know that you made this axe. I was at your house, and I noticed an axe, a handmade axe with a stone. It was on the windowsill of your living room. And I was so struck by how interesting it looked that I went and got my camera and I photographed the axe, thinking I want a picture of that. Later on, somebody told me that you had made this somehow. It's like a camp or something. And I thought, well, that's really neat. Now, what I want to point out about this assignment is this. This is also an axe or a hatchet. Now, imagine that I was at your house and I know that you have wood and you put it in the fireplace, burn it, and you have to cut it up. What if in your living room next to your stove there was this? I happen to have this. The exact same hatchet, axe. Now, would I have got, if I saw this on the wood pile, would I go get my camera and think, wow, look at that hatchet, what a cool hatchet, I want a picture of it? No, it never occurred to me in a million years to take a picture of the hatchet any more than I would take a picture of the lamp next to it. Some things about some things you strike you, you want to have a record of it. And so consequently, I made a record of that. And that led me to thinking, where is it? Let's go back to your picture, about the wonderful aesthetic of ancient things because they have an element which I would describe as a magical element, as a kind of fascinating, unknown element that gives it some kind of, like for example is this. Person goes in the woods with this hatchet, and wolves come up and look at the man or the woman or the person with this, and they think, leave him alone, he's one of us. He is a wild person. He's a magical person. But if the person in the woods sees a wolf, comes up with this, they say, let's get rid of this guy. He doesn't belong in the woods. He's got one of those things from a factory. What am I trying to say here? I'm trying to say that ancient things have a character, an irresistible character that, well, maybe other people don't feel it, but I find just, now what did this lead to? It lead to making those beads. Because you can go to the store and buy jewelry and you can see trillions and billions of beads made in a factory and all different ones. You can buy green ones and you can buy oblong ones and square ones with holes in them, and they're all perfect. And then there's the beads that you made with paper. They have a magical kind of mysterious quality. Well, maybe if it's just paper rolled up, how can that be magical and mysterious? Well, maybe it's not. I don't know. But let's look at this. These are the darts I made at your house. I photographed these darts, and this was your favorite dart, and your mom said, notice I said mom, notice that, notice I said mom for the first time, just remember that I'm capable of it, instead of mother. Your mother said, your mom said, has a whole different aesthetic, don't you think? Anyway, this was your favorite, this was your mom's favorite, and it's also one of my favorites, and this is my most favorite. It's 20 years old, and the reason it's better than these, and any of these, is because the fins are birch bark. So it's, and the stem is a red branch. And of course, it still works. Well, it didn't that time. Now, to conclude, if I saw this, 6 darts from Walmart, would I get out my camera and photograph it? No, I would only do that in the sense of wanting to show you how entirely uninteresting in terms of its aesthetic sense these are. Although you can bet they would always stick in the wall and work 100%. Like this would work 100% better than this. And this would work 1% better than this, which would work 100%. And so to conclude, since you rejected this assignment, I'll re-give it like this. Take a stick and make it have magical properties using any way you want. Thread, colored thread, purple thread, paint, whittling with a knife, anything you want. But do the assignment not copying this, But make a stick with magical properties, like this has magical properties, and like those darts do. And now, that concludes this lesson. So, and I'm behind an hour. You can guess why. Talk to you later today.